Hello there, Scott Graves here again from the On Track Music Guitar School. We are continuing our discussion on understanding the major scale. This is video 2 for the Music Theory 1 section where we're understanding the major scale. If you haven't watched video 1, you will not understand this one, so you got to go back and do that. You got to make sure you've done your fretboard essentials section. Okay, we're continuing on with our discussion on the major scale. When we left off, we talked about what the major scale is. The major scale is the sound do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. It's that sound, okay? And we talked about the fact that the major scale is the arrangement of whole steps and half steps from any starting point in this order. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. I gave you some suggestions on trying to build some major scales up the neck on your guitar, starting from some like first fret on the 6th string, 5th string, that. Hopefully you've done that. Okay, so if you haven't, go back and do that from the first video. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to build the major scale in different keys and how to determine the notes that fall within different keys. We know that the key of C has no sharps, no flats. It's just natural notes. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And the key of C is always a model that we can use to build all of our other major scales from, okay? What I'm talking about is this. If I forget what the pattern of whole steps and half steps is in the major scale, this whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, all I have to do is write down my natural notes from C to C and look at what those pattern of whole steps and half steps make. C to D is a whole, D to E is a whole, E to F is a half, F to G is a whole, G to A is a whole, A to B is a whole, B to C is a half step. Okay, and that will give me that pattern, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. I always remember when I'm looking at a major scale that half steps will always be between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8 scale degrees. Okay, everything else there's going to be a whole step in between those scale degrees. So, key of C, no sharps, no flats. It is the only key that has no sharps, no flats. Okay, if I have every other single key that I build is going to have at least one sharp or one flat in it, okay? And I'm going to show you how to build other keys right now. So we're going to determine the notes for the key of G major. So let's do that. This is what we're going to do. These are the steps we take. I'm going to erase this right here. And if I want to find the notes for the key of G major, the first thing I do is I write down the natural notes from G to G. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to go G, and then I'm going to go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay? So there I have my natural notes from G to G. G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now that is not the major scale yet. Okay? Remember I said only the key of C has no sharps, no flats. So this cannot be the key of G yet because there's no sharps and no flats in here. G is going to have something sharp or something flatted. We're going to figure out what those are. Okay. So first of all, my first step in determining the notes, natural notes from G to G. Now I'm going to put scale degrees underneath here. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So those are my scale degrees. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put little half step markers between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. Those guys have to be a half step apart from each other if we're going to have the major scale, and then there have to be whole steps from these other, in between the other scale degrees. Okay, so now next thing we're going to do, we're going to start from G, and we're going to work our way across and see if we have half steps and whole steps in between these notes and make it work out to the pattern where it's whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So this is what we're going to do. Let's look at the key of G. Is the key of G, is the distance from G to A whole step or a half step? What is it? Okay, it's a whole step. Are we supposed to have a whole step between 1 and 2 scale degrees in the major scale? Yes, we are. So we're going to put a W here. We have a whole step there. So that's working so far. What's the distance from A to B? A to B is a whole step. Are we supposed to have a whole step from 2 to 3? Yes, we are. Okay, so I'm going to put a W here. It's working so far. Now, from B to C, is that a whole step or is that a half step? That is a half step. Okay, B to C is a half step. Are we supposed to have a half step from 3 to 4? Yes, we are. Okay, so I've got a half step right there. Now I'm on C. C to D, is that a whole step or a half step? C to D is a whole step. Okay, so I'm going to put a W here, and it's working for our pattern so far. D to E, 5 to 6. Is that supposed to be a whole step or a half step? It's supposed to be a whole step, and is it? D to E, is that a whole step? Yes, it is. Okay, so we're working okay. Now let's look at this one. E to F. Is E to F a whole step or a half step? E to F is a half step. And to make the major scale from 6 to 7, I'm supposed to have a whole step right here. So if I have a half step there, I won't have the major scale. Now what can I do to make this a whole step? I can take my F and put a sharp next to it, okay, making this F sharp. And now the distance from E to F sharp is a whole step, and that will make my distance from 6 to 7 here a whole step. So I put that in, and now I've got a whole step right there. And now what's F sharp to G? F sharp to G is a half step, and I'm supposed to have a half step from 7 to 8 right there. So now I have just created the G major scale. Okay, this is the G major scale. I start here and I go whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. That's my major scale pattern. And if I put my starting point there, let's see if I can sing this. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay, that will give me the sound of the G major scale, this arrangement of notes. Notice I have a sharp right here. I have one sharp in this key. Okay, the key of G has one sharp in it. It's the only key that will have one sharp. Every single key has its own unique number of sharps and flats. The key of C has no sharps or flats. Key of G has one sharp. So G equals one sharp. If I was looking at a piece of music and I saw a staff like this, musical staff, and I saw a sharp up here next to the treble clef on the top line, on that F line, one sharp, I could look at that. Even if I don't know how to read music, I can look at that and go, oh, it's the key of one sharp. It's the key of G. So if it's time for me to take a solo in that song, I solo in the key of G major. Okay, so that's a clue that will clue you in for those of you who aren't great music readers. Okay, but anyway, the key of G has one sharp. It's the only key that has one sharp. Okay, let's try another key. Let's build one more. Let's do the key of D. Okay, I'm going to put a D up here. Okay, remember, this is how we do it. We start with natural notes. If I do the key of D, I'm going to go D, natural notes, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. So I do natural notes from D to D. Okay, now I put in my scale degrees. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, now as a reminder, I'm going to put in little half step markings between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8 to remind myself that that's where the half steps need to be. Okay, now I'm going to start here on this D. I'm going to check the pattern of whole steps and half steps. D to E is what? It's a whole step. Okay, so that's working so far. I'm supposed to have a whole step from 1 to 2. E to F is what? It's a half step. So what can I do here to make this a whole step? I can put a sharp right next to this F. E to F sharp is now a whole step. That gives me a whole step from 2 to 3. That's what I need. What's F sharp to G? That is a half step. So now I've got my half step between scale degree 3 and 4 where I need it. Half step. What's G to A? G to A is a whole step, and that's what I need from 4 to 5. What's A to B? A to B is a whole step. That's what I need from 5 to 6. What's B to C? B to C is a half step, so I need to do what? I need to put a sharp on this C, making that C sharp, and now B to C sharp is a whole step, okay, which gives me my whole step. That's what I need from 6 to 7. And now I'm on scale degree 7 going to 8, which is C sharp now, C sharp going to D, and that is a half step right there, okay? So I put my little half step marker right there, and everything is now dandy. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, okay? So that gives us our D major scale right there. So that is how we build the major scale. Now, one thing you got to do when you're building these major scales, and we're going to come back in a minute and do some more of these, but one thing you got to do is you always have to start here and work from left to right and go across, checking them one at a time. You can't just zero in on 3 and 4 and 7 and 8, do your half steps right there and make sure, look at that and go, oh, I'll fix that and make it a half step, I'll make that a half step. That would actually work in this key. But you can't do that because it might, with other keys, you might not have gotten something right in here. You might have messed something up. You always start with your root, move this way, and once something works, it becomes sacred ground. You don't mess with it. You move on to the next note, and then you fix things as you go across, and then you should end up with this pattern. So I'm going to stop the tape here, and then we're going to come back and build a few more of these things, and I'll give you an assignment to do, but let's just stop here and go ahead and load up the next video in the series, and we'll continue on with this.